Hello, this is a quick video to try and answer one of the most common questions that I get on this YouTube channel, which is what sort of calculator should I get? And the answer depends really on what you're trying to do with your calculator. You can see in front of you there I've got 4 different types of calculator. 3 of them are Casio, one of them is a Sharp, and they're all 4 different things. Now this first one, this one on the left, very basic calculator, only does the essential operations, plus, minus, multiply, divide. This one happens to also do some stuff with currency. Essentially, this calculator is not going to be very useful for any course, GCSE or higher. They're not really intended for people studying maths. They're just a basic calculator. So we can essentially ignore anything like that. This next calculator is a scientific calculator. The differentiator here really is whenever it's got the trigonometrical functions on it, it's going to be a scientific calculator or one of the higher models. But essentially, if you've got any trigonometrical functions on it, you're going to have all of these other things. Different calculators will vary. But this is going to be useful for anybody studying GCSE or IGCSE. You can use these in the A-level courses, sixth form courses, but you're going to miss out on some of the added functionality. There's this new type, it's sort of a hybrid between the scientific and the graphical types of calculator. These are the new ones that are being utilized in the new A-level system for mathematics starting first teaching September 2017. This does a little bit more than the scientific calculator. I'll talk about that one in a little bit more. These get called all sorts of things, but Core Math Scientific seems to be one of the names that they're being called. I don't think anybody's really settled on what to call this type of calculator. And then of course we've got the graphical ones. The key difference here between these that are good for A-level and these that are also recommended for A-level is that this one can draw graphs. Now if you're doing any of the sixth form courses, these are the 2 calculators that you're going to want to focus on, or these types of calculators anyway. There is a new requirement for A-level courses that there will be an implication or a requirement really that you will need to use calculators, and these are the 2 types that you're going to want to use, just because this does that little bit more than the scientific. Whether you choose to go for the graphical or not, obviously this will do graphs, this one will not. That's the main difference between the 2, and really it comes down to cost. I would say if you've got the money, it's definitely worth investing in a graphical calculator, definitely better than these core math scientific ones. But this will do everything that you are required to do as per the course. So other than this type, which is not very useful, I'm going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the different options that there are available to you and prices for these types of calculators. Now, as you can see, the 3 that I'm using are Casio. Some people will tend to use Texas or Hewlett-Packard or any of the other brands of calculators. To be honest, they're all pretty much the same, and it comes down a little bit to personal choice. I use Casio calculators, but when I was doing my own A-levels and degree, I used Texas Instruments calculators all the way through it, and I found them to be absolutely fine. They did everything that I wanted them to do. There was some lovely stuff it did with programming, and I would definitely recommend Texas calculators. The reason I use Casio now is simply where I work. They presented us with the best deal, essentially, a couple of years ago. We went over to the Casios and we found them to be that little bit more user-friendly, that little bit nicer. But I've also heard people argue exactly the opposite way for the Texases. So it really does just come down to your own personal choice. My recommendation would be, if you're at a school or college or university or something, I would choose whichever brand your maths department uses. So if they're recommending that you use Texases, then use Texas, because the teachers there will know how to use a Texas calculator rather than a Casio calculator. But to be honest, it doesn't matter. It is entirely up to you which one you choose. Casio, Texas, Hewlett-Packard, Sharp, all of them produce great calculators. They're all very useful. The main 2 tend to be Casio and Texas. And I've got some prices on each of those that I'll talk about as I go through the different types. But essentially, your choice doesn't really matter. I recommend these calculators to my students. If we were a Texas school, I would happily recommend them as well. Some of my students do turn up at the start of the year with a Texas calculator, and I'm always very happy for them to use that as well. So I would say don't believe anybody who tells you that one brand is better than another. essentially, they all do essentially the same thing, just minor tweaks in the way that they're set out. It's like anything really with different formats. Okay, so onto our first type. This is the scientific calculator. This will do all of the basic operations that you need for GCSE level courses. We've obviously got all of the trigonometrical functions, we've got powers, we've got logarithms and basic logarithm forms. This one's also got a change of base possible. We've got our fractions, and we've got our fractional and decimal display change button. Very, very useful. To be honest, virtually every scientific calculator is identical. They all do exactly the same thing. Whichever one you find in a shop is absolutely fine. They're all about the same price. They all do the same thing. There's no real great difference in terms of usability or even style. I would recommend using any of them. Now, I've got various prices to recommend to you, just so you get a quick sense of the different costs involved. This one priced at £5.99 on Amazon. I should say all the price I'm going to give you are from Amazon. The UK Amazon in August 2017. What I would also say is that these prices are not necessarily the best prices. I'm sure there are other websites that will offer them cheaper, and I would also recommend that you speak to the teachers, the maths department of the school or college that you go to, and you may well find that they have a better deal available to you. When I buy in bulk for my school, I can certainly get a better price than the ones that are here, so it's definitely worth doing it. But for simplicity, all prices presented today are going to be from Amazon UK. So as I say, £5.99 for this on Amazon. You can pick these up in Tesco and Asda and just about everywhere really. But if you're just doing your GCSE, you need a scientific calculator. You can tell if it's got the trig functions, it's going to be a scientific calculator, and that will do everything that you need. Choose any one of them, it really doesn't matter. One with a solar display is always nice, so you don't have to worry about batteries. But essentially, any scientific calculator is good for you. Okay, the second type of calculator is this new type of calculator. I don't think anybody has really settled down onto a name. A lot of places are calling things like Core Maths Scientific or something like that, essentially just that little bit higher than the scientific calculator. Now, the reason it's that little bit higher is that it will do quite a few more things. If we go into the menu, you'll see that there are a lot of different operations that it can do here. We've got our standard calculation mode that we've got there. We can do stuff with complex numbers, we can do base n calculations, matrices, vectors, statistics, statistical distributions. We can do some basic spreadsheets, tables, we can solve equations and functions and inequalities and all sorts of stuff. They're really good little calculators. This is the Casio FX991EX, also called the Class Whiz. Don't know why they call it that, but there you go. Class Whiz is a lovely little calculator, reasonably cheap, pretty good. I would recommend this for anybody who's going to do AS, A-level courses. If you're going to go on to do a degree in maths, you may want something a little bit more powerful. If you are starting GCSE and you know that you want to go on to AS or A-level, it's possibly worth picking one of these up straight away so that you get used to it and you don't need to buy a second calculator when you go into the sixth form. As I said before, this is the cheaper alternative to the graphical calculators. They will do everything that the exam boards require, and all of the exam boards have exactly the same requirements, so it doesn't really matter which exam board you're choosing. I would still definitely recommend these. These are quite nice little cheap ones. Amazon is currently selling this one for £26.23, slightly odd price, but there you go. And there's the Texas option, the TI-30X Pro, slightly cheaper at £17.51, which also does exactly the same stuff. It's a very good little calculator. I've had to play around with one just briefly, and it's a great little calculator as well. So definitely very, very good. Essentially, these are lovely calculators and will do everything that you need if you want to save that little bit money on the graphical calculators, which can get a little bit pricey. Okay, and moving on to the big ones now, we've got these graphical calculators, you'll see I've got two here. There's the slightly older model now, it's been out for a few years, the FX9860G2 and the FXCG20. Essentially, the main difference between these two is one is color, one is not. There's a few other little differences, and I'm going to post a second video on the differences between these two calculators. A lot of people asking, should I buy the 9860 or the CG20? So I'll post a separate video on the difference. But essentially, within the graphical calculator ranges, there are often two different types available to you, where you've got the usually black and white, slightly more basic one, say basic, it still does a lot, or the color one, which does that a little bit more, has that better resolution. If you're studying A-level, I would definitely recommend, if you've got the money, if you're happy to spend it, it's worth going for the graphical calculators over those core maths scientifics. It just gives you that little bit more functionality, those little bit more things that you can do. For prices, they do get a little bit expensive. What we've got, those two graphical calculators priced at £79.26 and £112.99. Just to say it again though, these are the prices that Amazon have them at. Personally, I wouldn't buy them from Amazon, but I've done it this way to keep things simple. I would always shop around if you're buying it just for yourself, but if you're buying it whilst at school or college, I would definitely recommend that you speak to your teachers, speak to your department. They may have a special deal or system organised with some suppliers so they can get them much cheaper. I can certainly get them a bit cheaper than these prices here, so these are just the Amazon prices. So these are the two for Casio. Texas, there's three options. We've got the TI-82 Stats, which is a little bit more basic than this one. Personally, I wouldn't really recommend just picking up that simple Stats version. The TI-84 is roughly equivalent to this one, very similar prices, 79 and 89, very similar prices. And the TI-84 plus CET, very simple to say name there, is roughly equivalent to the Casio CG20. They are roughly commensurate calculators. These are absolutely wonderful. The quick version of whether I would go for the color version or the black and white version, as with all things, if you can afford the better one, buy the better one. But as I say, I will be posting a more in-depth review, a little bit more in-depth anyway, review of the two of them side by side to actually compare the differences on them. And essentially that's it. So you've got those four different types of calculator. They're all for different purposes. So whether you know that you're going into A-level and you want the big meaty things that can handle graphs and can handle everything, or whether you're just going for the slightly more basic version but that does everything that you need for your sixth form course, or even if you're just studying GCSE and you want that just scientific calculator. There's a lot of options out there. Hopefully this has given you a quick guide to the differences between the different types of calculator and what I would recommend. Any questions, please post them below and I will do what I can to answer them as quickly as possible. But essentially, that's all for today. Thank you for watching.